I'm really thrilled to introduce our next speaker, Cheyenne Concepcion. Cheyenne is a multidisciplinary artist and designer based in San Francisco. She creates work that examines the politics of place using installation, social practice, sculpture, and textile. Drawing on her interest in research and urban planning and utilizing her training as a designer, Concepcion's work is site specific and is centered on cultural memory, place-based activism, migration, and often has a public component. She is the co-founder and artistic director of the New Monument Task Force, a fantastical municipal agency engaged in the dialogue, development, and design of new monuments in California. Over to you, Cheyenne.
Hi everyone, my name is Cheyenne Concepcion. I am an artist and designer between New York and San Francisco. My work uncovers the politics of place through installation, social practice, textile, and I'm the artistic director of New Monuments Task Force, a fantastical municipal agency engaged in the dialogue, design, and development of new monuments in California. My talk today is titled The Artist in the City, and it explores recent ruminations of mine and what I'm learning about my role as an artist in the city, and I hope you like it. So I will share my screen. Okay, so the story goes like this. It's February of 2020, and I'm beginning to plan an art installation for a transnational group exhibition titled Shaping the Past. It's an initiative by Monument Lab and the Goethe Institute addressing what, whom, and how we remember in public spaces. It was supposed to feature artists from around the world, myself included, mostly public artists working in collaborative ways. And so I was planning to showcase my project, Borderlands Archive, which is an independent archive I started in 2018. The project traces connection across territorial divide. It's an exploration of place, of cultural memory, of a misunderstood landscape between two countries. We kind of show our work as an exhibition like the one we had here in New York, and also as a web platform where we showcase artifacts that we've collected from books, photographs, donated objects, news, maps, and hopefully it will kind of serve as a resource in the future when we look back at this place. And so everything was going well in February of 2020 until it quickly wasn't. And so, oops, sorry, I don't know why this is there. And so in February 2020, and everything changed, especially in California, everything kind of stopped. And as artists, all of us were working in public spaces. And when the idea of gathering in collaborative ways and being in public space at all came off the table, our projects halted and we kind of regrouped and stayed safe. But by July of 2020, we picked our project back up again. But by July 2020, everything had changed. The world had changed, America had changed, and I had changed because of it. Following the murder of George Floyd, there was an ongoing, passionate national conversation about race and representation in the US. There was a deep frustration about countless injustices of how America treats Black and brown bodies. At this time, the national conversation became a local one. All over the city, monuments were being reckoned with, and on Juneteenth in Golden Gate Park, protesters toppled numerous monuments in the music concourse, and there were several vandalized across the city. Francis Scott Key and Junipero Serra shown here. Meanwhile, that same weekend, SF officials were removing monuments in the middle of the night. This is Christopher Columbus at Coit Tower. And at the same time, a political debacle around the Dr. Maya Angelou monument was evolving right before my eyes. Initially accepted, then rejected in 2019, Berkeley artist Lava Thomas's proposal for the Dr. Maya Angelou monument was quickly scrapped due to its design. In short, it wasn't traditional enough. In a 2019 statement by Supervisor Catherine Stephanie, who sponsored the public art legislation, claimed that the monument design didn't elevate Maya in the same way that men had been elevated across history. She was talking about the non-figurative form of the sculpture. She was talking about the need for more pedestals and more bronze. Following all this, in a July 2020 public meeting that I attended, the SFAC muted the end of Lava Thomas's speech addressing the controversy, inadvertently muting her. And this caused national and local outrage. Collectives like this see Black women cropped up to stand in solidarity with Lava, and rightfully so. And finally, Mayor London Breed in mid-July of 2020 ordered the SF Arts Commission to create a committee and municipal study to evaluate the city's 94 public monuments and memorials and their intersection with our country's racist history. And so it was definitely a moment in San Francisco at the time. And I think it was this weekend where I was, working as a public artist in this space, thinking about how we are represented in public art, thinking about how I create public art, and also being kind of an active member of my city, I decided that I would co-opt the city's municipal study and respective advisory committee. And so New Monuments Task Force starts here. The project emerged out of the idea to co-opt the city's municipal process, but do it better, do it in a way that serves us. They had fumbled so hard until now, how could they possibly get it right at this point? Also, the national context kind of peeked into my mind. If not now, then when? Why not now? And another question, why not me? Why not a brown woman who was first generational, never had seen a monument that represented anything like her upbringing or looked anything like her? And why not me, a rogue urban designer turned public artist? Even with all these questions, I knew where I needed to start. I wanted to revel in the idea of being an outsider. What can't the city touch, I thought? What can't they take space over, I thought? That's exactly where I wanted to start. I wanted to take control of that space, the space outside the institution, to create a participatory, larger than life work about our institutional structures and how they've manifested in our public art. Public art offices are really, really good at collecting data. But I think what artists can do is create timely points for critical inquiry. They can create moments of intense reflection. They can create public awareness. I thought, if monuments are so top down, can this project be bottom up? Could I create a project that shifts the power dynamics in the city in some way? Could I create change? And for me as an artist, that is the most exciting question. Understanding our agency as artists is something that I am developing day by day. But I often fall back on this quote by one of my mentors, Stephanie Siuko. And I highlight the last part because I think it's so central to this project. What should the questions be? I think at the time when I was developing the project, the city was also developing their project. They were talking about monetary figures of the monuments, studying the maintenance plans, who gets to take care of them, whose responsibility is it? People were also asking questions about who was the worst figure, who was the most racist colonial monument of all. And it was almost like a Where's Waldo for monuments in a way. And to me, when I was observing this, I kind of was thinking that no one was asking the right questions. And no one was asking questions like, what are the narratives being communicated as a whole through these art objects? What is our relationship to monuments? What is our relationship to public art? Can these objects engage us to think critically, to see ourselves? Can they engage us to see the truth? And so while developing these questions associated with this work, I was building a brain trust of artists, curators, nonprofit cultural leaders, and activists. I like to think of us as outsiders, a motley crew maybe. I think that public art needs eyes. It's a collective process after all. And I needed an advisory committee. I needed to create a task force. So I recruited fellow artists, curators, mentors, and even cold called Bay Area cultural workers who I knew was doing the work, such as Xavier Buck from the Huey P. Newton Foundation. And I asked them to join our efforts. Who hadn't been at the table, I thought. If that's you, you can sit with us. You can work with us. And I felt like there was a lot of power in that. So I led the 3-part unofficial municipal study, and I titled it The Relic Report. It was supposed to be in 3 parts, so what I'm showing you here is Relic Report Volume 1, and it was designed to introduce the project and the main questions, and also present a public comment survey with which I was going to poll SF residents So I drew from my background in urban design and landscape architecture and employed the typology study as the main methodology for assessment. I used categories and groupings to weigh the collection as a whole. Who were the most celebrated individuals? Why? What was their gender diversity? What was their racial diversity? What were the different design styles? What were the different materials used? Where did they come from? So we came up with 6 different categories, and I'll go through them. The first one here is the Boys Club. And so you can see the gender diversity of the monument collection in San Francisco with 53 men and 3 women. There was other factors, like there was actually a lot of women representation in the collection, such as women representing men like angels or Lady Liberty. So that was kind of interesting, but only 3 women represented real women. There were the OGs, which were 15 monuments commemorating prominent men of colonial expeditions. There was Modernish, which was inspired by the recent call in San Francisco for more traditional monuments. So I wanted to look at the non-traditional ones. Where did they come from? What did they celebrate? There was War and Peace. It turns out there's 10 celebrating war and 2 celebrating peace. There's Artists and Idealists, which were often gifts from other countries, and many of them litter Golden Gate Park. And there was What Remains, which were monuments that were hard to place, often bureaucrats or city or state, figures. They were also weirdly located monuments, hard to find, somewhat forgotten. And I thought that brought up some kind of idea about what our relationship to monuments as a whole are. Do we notice them when we walk by, and have they moved us in any way? And to me, that feels like a missed opportunity. And so after we released Volume 1, we commenced a public comment period. This project was supposed to co-opt municipal processes and use it for us. And so that's what we did. And we published a public comment survey, which was available online and through a mailer campaign. And the survey asked 7 qualitative questions. I wanted to start where the SFAC couldn't start. So I wanted to focus on things that were harder to answer, things that were subjective, things about personal views. And so we had around 100 respondents to our survey over 30 days. And that all got compiled into a second volume of Relic Report, which highlighted amazing feedback by San Francisco citizens about what they want to see in the monuments of the future. What has hurt you in the past? What do you think a monument is? How can we improve our definition of monuments? And so we had the most beautiful responses. People spent a lot of time sending in really thoughtful responses. And so we tried to showcase this collective process through our second edition, which we show here. And so it's organized by the 7 different survey questions, and we kind of summarize with our recommendations as a task force. So the task force met 3 separate times to kind of go over the tons of community input and kind of curate what were the most important messages that we wanted to see in the booklet. And most importantly, we also created 6 recommendations for new monuments, because this was an unofficial city study, remember, so we needed to come up with recommendations, as city studies do. And so I'm going to read them out loud, because in talks like this, I like to read them out loud because I think it's part of the ritual of what we went through over 6 months together. And so it goes like this. Number 1, new monuments must expand public knowledge. Number 2, new monuments must not be on the side of oppression. Number 3, new monuments must disrupt old ideas of what monuments can be. And number 4, new monuments must be dynamic and ever-changing. And number 5, new monuments must tell stories on a community level. And number 6, new monuments must challenge observers to stop and think twice. And so Relic Report has become our guiding document. It lights the way forward for New Monument Task Force's future initiatives. And even today, I still look back on the book every month or so when I'm working on projects, because it has so much amazing content in it. And on that note, I wanted to talk about some of the initiatives that we've had in 2021, mostly since publishing the Relic Report. So here we were able to project our 6 demands on the side of YBCA in downtown SF as part of the SF Urban Film Festival for a couple months every night. And so that was pretty cool, taking up public space. Another initiative we did was a workshop called Marble and Media Lab, in which we partnered with 01 Art and Technology and new media artist Camilla McGrade. And so this was a really fun project where we wanted to create a workshop and site it at a really important place. I discussed this earlier in my talk, which was the music concourse, and a lot had happened there in Juneteenth of 2020. So being what New Monuments Task Force is, which is kind of this renegade public art agency, I wanted to take up space in a very obvious way and kind of site this workshop at this site of protest and reckon with the monuments or toppled monuments using augmented reality there. And so we, with the help of Camilla, who's kind of an AR expert, we found 8 emerging artists from the Bay Area and supported their projects and had them kind of choose a monument to create a project around. We created workshops with different skill building tools, and then ultimately did a guerrilla public art walking tour at the end. And so I'm just going to show some projects. This is one of the artists, Caleb Lightfoot, and he did Francis Scott Key. And so he kind of went into the different stages of history that this monument had experienced. I think 2020 was the second one with the BLM protests. And then he imagined that the next one would be its ruin, and following its ruin would be this kind of historical analysis of what happened there, what that was, and the fragments of the flag and the fragments of the monument kind of become hyper analyzed in an archaeological plate. And then finally, he reconstructs this scene in augmented reality with the rubble, and he ultimately projected it at the site. So this is kind of just an example of one of the projects that we had. Here's a map of the different projects as a whole. And I'm going to share 2 videos with you. This is Hannah Scott. I think she works at Gray Area, so hello.
Welcome to Future Society X's Department of Historical Recontextualization. We are committed to a radically new understanding of history that engages the complexity of our past rather than asserting a single narrative arc that bends toward progress. Statues attempt to collapse the past into a single story, to cast kaleidoscopic.
Oops, actually, I wasn't supposed to do that. I was just supposed to show you the next one, which is May Ross's work, an Indigenous artist who wanted to showcase the landscape before it was found by a monument that honors 3 men navigators who discovered them. And finally, our most recent initiative is called In the Future, and it's a digital zine where we're curating and spotlighting artists who are creating public art that are reimagining new ways of taking up space in the public. And so we put out an international call, and we're currently building a website and web platform for which to view this work. And we felt like we needed to do this because all of our projects in the past focused on the past. I think 2020 was that vibe. We were reckoning with everything we've inherited until now. And this project we were brainstorming about, and we're like, we should start thinking about the future now. And it feels fresh, and I'm excited about it. And it should be readily to view in 2 months. And so I'm going to finish this talk to finish up why I'm here and the things I've been trying to explain through this talk and through my thought process is, so what is the role of the artists in the city? And I can tell you that through New Monuments Task Force, I've learned that my role as an artist in the city is very crucial. At a time of reckoning and reflection, artists have the skills to create a conversation about trauma and repair. Artists also have the potential to negotiate ethics, which create more just environments, which create more just cities. And so 4 things I want you guys to come away with today are 4 things I think artists can do. Artists can create awareness, like the Guerrilla Girls feminist poster series. Artists can piece together fragmentary evidence, like forensic architecture's tactical-based research approach, and their amazing projects shown here, Triple Chaser. Artists can create collaborative action, like Decolonize This Place and their poster series about how to take a monument down. And artists can ask the right questions, like we did in San Francisco. I think these 4 things together can create power. And if we can create power, we can create change. And that's all I have, but thank you for having me.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm so excited to be here live with Cheyenne. What an amazing community practice that the New Monuments Task Force is. I mean, it was so cool to see the way that you brought people together around this common goal of making positive impact in our public spaces. You know, and there was one part of your presentation, you know, and when you were reading out the oh gosh, what would you call? I don't want to say would you
the recommendations?
The recommendations. I wanted to say manifesto, but I was like, maybe that's like a little too political or something. But the you know, the recommendations, like new monuments should always be dynamic. Like that was a point that I felt was particularly cogent and interesting because the concept of a monument is so static. Like the whole point of it being like it's almost like its ontology is rooted in its permanence or perceived permanence. So I would love to talk a little bit more about that dynamism and, you know, how that would manifest itself across any kind of new monument.
Yeah. So I love that recommendation, and I think it kind of what you're talking about is how we've traditionally kind of conceived monuments and what we think of them as. I mean, they've been around forever, so it's something that's almost ingrained in us, but I think we're kind of in a time where we're it's kind of up for grabs to redefine it, and I've kind of get that question a lot. Monuments are, static objects. They're usually to kind of commemorate men and national victories or things like that. And I think we're kind of entering a time where we're rejecting that definition. And we definitely did that 2 years ago. Or I guess it's only been a year actually, in 2020. And now I feel like it's kind of an exciting time because people are wanting to know what's next. And I feel like this idea of having a dynamic monument is a really good place to start. And I think the person that submitted a lot of our recommendations were based off of citizen input. And so the person that kind of commented on dynamism was really kind of pushing this idea of also including technology and kind of a multi-sensory kind of an experience of a monument, because that's kind of where they've failed until now, right? So why wouldn't you start at the place of the breaking point, I guess? And so let's unpack it.
No, totally. I mean, augmented reality feels like a medium that avails itself to that really nicely, in the sense that you can have some kind of marker that's visible in physical reality that perhaps, is something that is purely abstract, that doesn't have any kind of, moral, ethical connotation to it. And as values change, we can update in augmented reality what that manifestation of that might be. I mean, that's just one kind of way that I could imagine this working, as we saw that the sculpture with the sound playing, and I could easily see that becoming a different shape to match the needs of a certain time, or the words that are spoken as part of the audio part of it, could be altered to be more inclusive and add more voices to what that monument stands for. And so, I mean, it just seems so ripe with possibility. And I love that idea of breaking away from the staticness of this idea of permanence, because truly, I think permanence in itself is kind of a fallacy. I don't think anything is totally forever, and we have to be adaptable to those kinds of change. And that's also something that Worlding Protocol is really rooted in, is like, we can't think of the world as this one fixed thing. We have to continue to reassess and reevaluate all of the interdependencies that we have here.
Yeah.
We have a number of, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I have a couple questions from the audience that have just come in. Cool. Hannah's here, actually, who we were just speaking about, and is asking, I would love to hear more from Cheyenne about how and if she approaches the fantastical satirical task force as a form of world building.
I love the project because it's this amazing little vehicle to kind of talk about a lot of things. I often feel like I take on big projects like that where I'm like driving this big bus, but it feels much bigger than me. But that satirical voice, that kind of punk rock, like when I was thinking about the project, and I don't view myself as punk, but I feel like that project is definitely punk. And I try to like get that out of it with the project voice. But I think the satirical, the playfulness, at the end of the day, I think it is kind of cheeky and snarky and funny, but I am talking about serious things. There's a lot of pain that's been kind of felt by these art objects. It's a public work, so there are more expectations of public art to kind of serve community, to kind of serve like a narrative of the city, kind of so they do have jobs. Like I feel like monuments do have jobs, and as public objects, they should serve community. And so I am talking about serious things with a kind of like cheeky approach to it. And I feel like that helps deliver the point in a better way. When the project started, it started out of this idea to co-opt a city agency. And I wanted to do everything like they couldn't do, which was have a voice, have do things quickly, have agency. My voice is very strong and snarky in that book, in the Relic Report, and I encourage, like for example, the workshop we did. I was encouraging people in the workshop to also use your voice and your perspective and loudly, and so it's something that I use to disguise something very serious and something that's kind of hard to talk about and complex, and there's a lot of differing opinions, and I feel like that playfulness and it's part of the art of it, is to kind of subvert the message and make you think. Like if I came to you on the street and was like, let's talk about monuments, I'd someone would put their hand in my face or like walk away immediately. But part of the delivery is important because it opens up, it's like the entry point for the idea, right? And the idea is a messy idea. Like monuments are extremely messy political objects. And so how it's not easy to talk about. And I feel like the playfulness and the punk rockness attitude, it serves that in a way.
Absolutely. I was just talking the other day about, we were talking about virtual reality, and I was talking to my friend Tina, and we were saying that, in after COVID and like kind of all of the different like WebGL and metaverse projects and augmented reality projects that have been popping up everywhere, we were talking about a return to the VR headset because it's kind of like a kitsch object at this point. It's such a funny experience that like is still like the best kind of thing that we have in certain regards. And the thing that to me about that particular medium that I find, and augmented reality as well, is that it's so absurd. It's like the absurdity of it like makes it more immersive. It makes the world feel more real. It gives you this kind of like different kind of, and honestly more intimate, because when you're laughing at something and when something is kind of piquing your interest in that way, you kind of come closer to it. And it feels more intimate.
It's like the bodily experience, because you're kind of outside of this world, this couch that I'm sitting in at like immediately, versus looking at something on your phone and still being rooted in this space. I feel like it's kind of a transition. Using the headset. We didn't use those. We used phones for our workshop, phones and tablets.
Well, something else about, and this is I asked a couple other guests this question, and I have my own interesting ideas about this question, but I'd love to pose this to you in the context of the New Monuments Project. Augmented reality is a really fascinating medium because in a lot of ways it exemplifies the capability of simulation to do anything. But at the same time, when you create an image on your phone, you can't touch it. Like you can make a filter that turns all of the grass into lava, but when you touch the grass, you're not going to get burned, kind of thing. And so to me, there's this really interesting like duality or tension there. Not even duality, I'd hate to speak in a binary, but there's this tension that's existing there between the possible and the impossible. And I'm wondering, how do you think through that tension between something that is on your phone and kind of feels impermanent versus the I'm not to go back to permanence, I mean but do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. When you were talking, something that came to mind, I don't know if this is necessarily related to our experience, but with the Marble and Media Project, but you kind of made me want to think about taking augmented reality to a next step by involving your body. Like the experience isn't just visual. Like what if you can kind of say, okay, now touch the monument or something, and then it becomes like more performative, I think, in some way. And it made me think about if we want to restage the Marble in Media project and do it in a more controlled environment, maybe more of a gallery space, because it's something that was hard, actually. If you want to talk about augmented reality, it was actually something hard to pull off in a public environment because there was so much other things going on. I don't know if you've been to the music concourse, but I think even during the pandemic, it got even crazier, but there's just hundreds of people walking, and it's hard to get your phone to kind of recognize it with all the movement. And so I feel like this is the next step of, well, from what we learned, and if we would do it in a public place, I'd say would to kind of almost embrace the movement. I don't know how to do that. I'm just like thinking about ideas of how augmented reality could be improved. At least
that's where it starts, right? Is with the idea. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's like that's the first step. Is we have to imagine what could be in order to make it so. And I think that this is sort of connected to another audience question that we have. This comes from Auto Art Machine. And they ask, Cheyenne, I'm curious about what you think of physical and AR transformations of monuments versus total removal. Like, and to me, that kind of reads as like, is it possible to undo the harm that the physical monument causes through a purely virtual transformation?
I don't think, I think undoing the harm is a big task. I don't know if any intervention could totally remedy that. But I do think I love this idea of layering. And I think that it should be, yes, augmented reality, like looking at Hannah's project and the things we were doing and the music concourse. There is this idea of layering of history that is kind of inherently involved with AR. So I love that. And I think that the layers could also be physical. I think that people should stop taking care of the monuments. There's someone employed by the city running around scraping bird poop off of all of the monuments. I feel like there should be a layer of age, a layer of disrepair, because these are old ideas. If someone splashes red paint on it out of, protest, I like this idea of leaving it there or letting it age and kind of into a ruin. And then I think that we wouldn't not learn the lesson that way. And I'm actually I'm not an advocate for removing them. I think that they should stay in place and there should be creative actions around them, or they could be moved to another location and contextualized differently. But I love this idea of layering, and I think that AR does it really well. And then there's this also idea of us, right now in 2021, we're reckoning with these ideas, but there's going to be another voice not heard. There's going to be another kind of wave of thinkers in 20 years. And so we should continue to layer on this, this object. I think that AR is kind of something that is a really easy alternative to work with now, and something I want to keep doing. And I know other public art offices are thinking about too.
Absolutely. Thinking about public art offices, we have a question from Barry, who asked, and this is a great question because I'm curious too. What is the city's response been, if at all, to this project?
So we had been in contact with them from the beginning because of our connections with the Goethe Institute. And so they've listened, and we've had private conversations, and they still haven't published their report, so they're still working on that, and they've just assembled a task force. One of our task force members is on their task force, so we'll find out more, but they haven't met yet. So it's slowly coming along. I think that they had a really big push for more public input, and I don't want to take full credit for that, but I think that our kind of push to have more of a public facing project really did affect their process. I really do think it did, because when we were first discussing it, it wasn't, or when they first kind of came out and said that they were going to take on a project like that, it was never kind of discussed. And now it seems like that it's a center point of their strategy. So that makes me feel like we kind of did our job. I also know because of they were looking for a consultant and we were kind of entertaining that idea. So I know that they do know we also carry knowledge. So I think that I wish them the best, and they haven't, we'll see what they publish in a year or two. And we'll continue to do our work and leading the way. And I think a lot of our projects are speculative, but they have solutions to them. Like we are making good suggestions, and yeah, we had an origin of trolling them, like lovingly trolling them in a little way, but I think that we want the same outcome. We want more representation in form and allegory of monuments. We want more artists of color making them. We want more funding for new ideas. We want more dynamic monuments, as we said.
Amazing. Well, I mean, I'm going to leave it with those requests, because I hope that people can, listen to them, really internalize them, and think about strategies that we can all work together to meet them, because it's so clear that our public spaces need to change, and the morals and the values that were in popular favor are no longer. And I love that idea of leaving a monument to rot, because if an idea is really still true and still relevant to a society, that society will build a new monument, and so, it's gonna, if that's still relevant, then it will continue to be. But if it's not, we can let that be a thing of the past.
I know, exactly. Nice way to leave it.
Thank you so much for being here, Cheyenne. It was so wonderful to have you.
Thanks. Good luck today.
Thanks so much.
Bye.